The fact is that each one of us is connected directly to the universe. And I intend to demonstrate that scientifically, philosophically, religiously, and intuitively. We know from science itself, from a marvelous field called quantum mechanics, that the universe is a living universe. And I mean that literally. And because it is a living universe, and because we're connected to that universe, we have a direct hand in creating our own reality. Yet, we have not been taught that. So we don't know how to create our own reality. We don't even realize we are creating our own reality. And my intention is to explain and teach how we create our own reality and the methods for accomplishing it. Thank you.
And secondly, you have to also understand that your intention is going to affect your world, and that what you think, your thoughts, your very thoughts, affect everything that's going on in your life. And so you have to think wisely.
We are frequency generators. If you get close to someone's skin, you can feel infrared energy being given off. If you look at them, you're seeing light energy given off. We now have scans where you can put a machine around somebody's head instead of putting the electrodes on their head, and perceive and record the energy that their brain is giving off.
The most potent form of energy, by the way, is thought. It penetrates all space and all time. Every thought has a frequency. We can measure a thought. What most people don't understand is a thought has a biochemical and bioelectrical property. Every thought, which means it has a frequency. And so if you're thinking that thought over and over and over again, or if you're imagining in your mind, okay, having that brand new car, having the money that you need, building that company, finding your soulmate, if you imagine what that looks like, you're emitting that frequency on a consistent basis. Our job as humans is to hold on to the thoughts of what we want, make it absolute clear in our minds what we want, and from that we start to invoke one of the greatest laws of the universe.
Subway exhibit comes to us from Japan and Mr. Masuro Emoto. Mr. Emoto became terribly interested in the molecular structure of water and what affects it. Now, water is the most receptive of the four elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a microscope.
For
one sample of water, we drop about 0.5 cc's onto each 50 petri dishes. Then we take those 50 petri dishes and freeze them in a freezer at minus 25 degrees Celsius for about 3 hours. We take those frozen samples into a refrigerator that is set at minus 5 degrees Celsius, where a microscope with a camera is set up. There we take photographs of each of the 50 water drops individually. We first take photographs of water that we did not put any information in. Then we take the water with information and do the same procedure just described. We take those before and after photographs and compare the differences. When we projected the feeling of love and thanks to water, it made the most beautiful crystal. At times like this, I think water is at peace.
This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk. Now, in this next series of pictures, Mr. Emoto printed out words, taped them to bottles of distilled water, and let them out overnight. This first photograph is a picture of the pure distilled water, just the essence of itself. These subsequent photographs, as you can see, are each different. This is the chi of love. And we move along here to thank you. And you can see where he taped that to this bottle here. But if you read Japanese, you already knew that. Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
Welcome back to Healthy Planet, Healthy Me. We are now joined with Dr. Masaru Emoto, water missionary from Japan and graduate of the Yokohama Municipal University's Department of Humanities and Sciences. He is author of the best-selling books Messages from Water, The Hidden Messages in Water, and The True Power of Water. Dr. Emoto is a longtime advocate for peace in relation to water. He has gained worldwide acclaim through his groundbreaking research and discovery that water is deeply connected to our individual and collective consciousness. That's amazing. Now, in the film Water, there's an actual example that you can see where I don't know if it was Dr. Emoto's experiment, but there were 3 beakers of water with rice in them. correct?
Yes.
And what happened, what you saw after this 3-month period, which you can see in the film, is the first speaker to the left, which was given the intention,
Thank you.
Thank you, was beautiful.
Still had the right structure.
Still had the right structure, and it was beautiful. The second one, which was given the emotion,
You full?
started looking very black, and it was breaking down. I don't know if it was getting moldy, but it looked ugly to the eye. And then the third beaker, the one to the farthest right,
which was ignored.
Which was ignored, and tell us what that ended up looking like.
It almost deteriorated to almost a liquid, like a soup. It had no original texture of the rice.
Okay, so what we're talking about is that, are we saying, Dr. Emoto, are you saying that water has a memory, that water has a conscious? What are you determining in your scientific research?
What I believe is that water can differentiate between a harmonious vibration and a non-harmonious vibration. And as it does that, that result manifests in the design of the crystal being beautiful or not. And so the same principle applies to rice. And we saw that visually with this experiment, how if you direct either bad words or just even bad thoughts to rice, that since it is a non-harmonious vibration, it starts to break it down faster.
REG machines, random event generators, are electronic tosses of the coin.
One type of random number generator experiment that's been conducted many, many times, hundreds of times, over the past 4 decades or so, since around the 1960s, has been a random generator that only produces sequences of random bits, zeros and ones, like flipping coins. And you would simply ask somebody to press a button, it would produce 200 bits. And you would ask them to say, well, try to make it produce more 1 bits than 0 bits. And when you take the entire body of literature, all of the hundreds of experiments that have been done, you can ask a single question. Did it matter that people were trying to push it towards ones or push it towards zeros? And the overall answer is yes, it does matter. That somehow intention is correlated with the operation, with the output of these random number generators, such that if you wish for more ones, somehow the generators produce more ones.
This leads naturally to wonder, are people affecting the world of reality that they see? You betcha they are. Every single one of us affects the reality that we see, even if we try to hide from that and play victim. We all are doing it.
It's been discovered in the laboratory over the last 15 or 20 years, for example, that intention does have physical effects.
So, for example, we recently conducted a study where we recruited couples, one of whom had cancer. And we took the partner of the cancer patient and we trained them in what we call the compassionate intention program. And so they were invited in to participate in a training program. A lot of it had to do with meditation. It had to do with heart opening. It had to do with subtle energies. And we took them through this training program, and then we asked them to go home and continue to practice this intervention for 8 weeks. We brought them back and we put them in our laboratory, and we monitored the patient in one room. And we put them in a 2,000-pound electromagnetically shielded room so that there was no possibility of electromagnetic fields or the partner of the cancer patient talking to them on their radio, on their cell phone and saying, okay, breathe deeply now. We could rule out any of those kind of conventional explanations. Meanwhile, the partner who'd gone through the training program sat in another room and watched the image of their loved one on a closed-circuit television screen. And then at random times throughout the session, they were asked to send loving, compassionate intention to the patient. The idea was to see if we could find correlations between the intention of the one person and the physiological activity of the other. What we found is that there was a significant correlation in the physiological activity of this person and the physiological activity of the other. This suggests that there is some way in which information is transferred that isn't accountable by the conventional Newtonian model of cause and effect. You know, the partner of the cancer patient wasn't coming in and whispering in their partner's ear, "Calm down now." You know, quite the contrary. They were at a distance, and there was no way that the two people knew when this kind of interaction was happening, and yet it happened.
So the first experiment we ran in London, and we had a leaf, and we had a control leaf. And we sent intention just to change those little light emissions, to make the thing glow, because we felt that would be the easiest way for people to imagine it. Make it glow. The next week, Gary calls me up. He says, "You won't believe this. There's so much glowing effect on this leaf that there's a neglect effect for the other leaf. The other leaf is darker than usual. This one is glowing." Now, when we say glowing, we mean glowing according to his equipment, CCD cameras. You couldn't see this with the naked eye, but you can see it with the naked eye with photos. I can't show them to you because we're publishing the study, and scientific journals insist on publishing all the data first. So now we've run 3 germination experiments, and we just ran one with my group on Thursday. And with this, we've tried to send intention to make seeds grow a bit faster. And we had 3 other sets of seeds. And we found, when Gary did the analysis with special statistics, that all 3 so far, we don't have the results yet for Thursday, also had an effect. The seeds sprouted much faster than the control seeds. How about that? In one case, it was 100 people in Rhinebeck, New York, sending intention to the seeds in the University of Arizona. Just 100 people. And we had a giant, significant effect. That's what they were like. We just sent intention to some seeds like that. And our intention was very specific, for them to sprout at least 3 inches by the 4th day of growing. It's always important to be very specific with intention. We now know that intention is what they call coherent, which is another way of saying it's well-ordered light. And once again, Gary, with his equipment, with his special, very sensitive CCD cameras, has actually photographed light coming out of the dominant hands of healers. We know from all the amazing, amazing evidence that has been amassed by people like Dean Radin and Marilyn Schlitz. And Marilyn I also want to honor because she was one of the first people out there to do direct mental influence on living systems. The first person, was among the first people to do really good studies of how mind affects other living systems. But there have been studies showing that we can affect everything from machinery to single-cell studies to full-fledged human beings. Many, many, many thousands of studies. That's why I have to laugh when people talk about there being no evidence. Somebody said that the field was based on Star Wars, nothing more than Star Wars. And I wanted to send them those 50 pages of notes and bibliography and say, you know, tell me that this is science fiction. We know from a lot of studies that it's actually a something. You know that phrase, a thought is a thing. More properly, we should be saying a thought is a thing that affects other things, because it's affecting things at every moment. It's an energy we've actually been able to measure.
Over the past 18 years, our research center has investigated heart-brain interactions, how the heart and the brain communicate with each other, and how that affects consciousness and our perceptions. One of the things we identified in our research was the state we now call coherence. And what we found was that when we're feeling positive emotions, like we're really appreciating the sunset, or really feeling love or compassion or care for someone, that the heart beats out a very different message. The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field produced in the body. And what we've now found is that if we look at the spectrum analysis of the magnetic field radiated by the heart, that emotional information is actually encoded and modulating into those fields. So by learning to shift our emotions, that's changing the information we're encoding into the magnetic fields radiated by the heart, and that can impact those around us. We are fundamentally and deeply interconnected with each other and the planet itself, and what we do individually really does count and matters.
Now, where this gets important is that scientists, and this is in the standard physics textbooks, this is no surprise what I'm about to say, is if you change the field of energy that the atom lives in, you change the atom. You can change that field electrically, or you can change it magnetically. And there are terms for the effects. The Zeeman effect, the Stark effect are well-documented effects of electrical and magnetic changes in the field that change the atom. Well, while it sounds technical and maybe not relevant, where it gets really relevant very fast is our hearts are the strongest bioelectrical and magnetic field generators in our bodies. Our hearts generate stronger electrical fields than our brains. They generate stronger magnetic fields than our brains. Our hearts are 5,000 times as powerful magnetically than our brains. And we hear about EKGs of our hearts. They're up to 100 times stronger than the EEG, the electrical information in our brains. So when we create thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, compassion, prayers of forgiveness in our hearts, that's the words that we call those experiences. But to the field, what we're doing is we're creating electrical and magnetic waves in here that are now known to change the stuff out here. And in that way, we are linked. So when we talk about our universe, possibly as a simulation, it tells us that we are not separate, that we are empowered not to control or manipulate or impose our will, rather to participate, as Princeton physicist John Wheeler suggests, to participate in the way this reality unfolds, to participate in our personal growth and healing, in the healing of our loved ones, to participate in the peace that happens in our families and between nations.
Mind, intention, belief. Can these factors influence healing?
If you think you have an incurable disease, if you think it yourself, you are right. If you think your problem is curable, then you are also right. It all depends on your intention.
When you think about intention, what is intention? And how does intention play a role in healing? Intention plays a role when you think about how our thoughts and our emotions and our cognitions influence our immune system and our endocrine system. And we know that this happens. We know that people who feel a tremendous amount of stress, for example, have a diminished capacity in terms of their immune systems functioning.
Sending an intention that I am better, sending information with belief that I am better, is sending information to the body to correct itself. Because as we say, a thought is an actual physical energy too, and it sends information to the body as well.
It's been very well demonstrated that our belief system affects how we behave and how we perform. And it also affects our lifestyle. So if we don't believe that we can help ourselves, we probably cannot. If we don't believe that positive information is useful to our health and well-being, then it probably won't be.
And the reason I don't is that I believe that belief itself is the body's strongest medicine. And if you believe something is going to work, regardless of what that is, it's going to work for you. There was a study in Houston of some patients going through a knee operation for arthritis. Half actually went through an operation where they were worked on for their arthritis. The other half were given a sham operation where they just opened the knee and then closed it and did nothing. They found over 3 years of follow-up that both sets of patients reported having no pain. So the patients where nothing was done to them still reported being pain-free. Their arthritis was gone. There have been other studies looking at if there's any difference between going to the gym and thinking about going to the gym. And with this study, they took a group of people and they sent half to the gym to work on their biceps. And the other half were allowed to sit in their armchairs and just think about going to the gym and working on their biceps. And they still recorded a very strong effect in the group who had just sat in their armchairs. The couch potatoes still built up their biceps. So the body really can't distinguish between, action and thought. And you see this most clearly with the placebo effect.
I took the visualization process from the Apollo program and instituted it during the 1980s and 90s into the Olympic program. And it was called Visual Motor Rehearsal. When you visualize, then you materialize. And the interesting thing about the mind is we took Olympic athletes and then hooked them up to sophisticated biofeedback equipment and had them run their event only in their mind. Incredibly, the same muscles fired in the same sequence when they were running the race in their mind as when they were running it on the track. How could this be? Because the mind can't distinguish whether you're really doing it or whether it's just a practice. I think if you've been there in the mind, you'll go there in the body.
Traditional Western medicine typically attributes spontaneous or miraculous healing to placebo. But what exactly is the placebo effect?
The placebo effect is the fact that a belief that a person has can override their biology. Well, it's so profoundly important that science has recognized that at least 1/3 of all healings, including drugs and surgery and other allopathic interventions, 1/3 of all healings has nothing to do with the process, but has to do with the placebo effect. That a person believes that the process is going to heal them and heals themselves in spite of the fact that maybe the pill was a sugar pill or the operation was just a sham and wasn't real. And why this becomes important is this clearly 1/3 of all healings occurs without anybody doing anything other than having a positive thought.
It seems time that we began to shift the lens and start really focusing on what is the nature of the placebo. How is it that you can take an inert substance, something that has no known medicinal capacity, potential, and that inert substance not only can create physiological changes in the body, but actually somehow is able to manage a whole cascade of responses within a very complex system, such that it can target the liver or the kidney or the lungs. That is a great mystery, and we don't understand that, and much more needs to be done.
The book essentially encapsulates many of the things that we've been talking about today. It describes in very lay terms, it's not a technical book, but describes the science, very exciting science. Western scientists now acknowledge the fact, and it is a fact, that we are bathed in a field of intelligent energy. It's everywhere all the time. It's not out there. It's inside of me. It's inside of you. We connect with it. The language of human emotion and thought and feeling and belief, those kinds of words describe the language that allows us to communicate with this field. And when we can access this field, this is where the miraculous healings in the human body come from, and tremendously enhanced immune systems and the disappearance of cancerous tumors inside the body.
When I was 15 years old, I had a very serious motorcycle accident. I was on a motorcycle I shouldn't have been on, and we were hit by a car that caused a very serious wound in my leg. Ended up with 66 stitches. at the point of impact, I clearly remember having an out-of-body experience where my consciousness watched my body tumbling through the air and ultimately landing. And it was sort of shocking to me when I kind of came back into the body. That said to me that perhaps my consciousness isn't just in my brain, but that it is imbued with more quality than that. And then as I was facing a very serious outcome, they talked about the possibility of having to amputate part of my leg. I remember laying with a cast from my hip down to my ankle and thinking about how to rally my immune system through my thoughts such that I could promote healing in my leg. And so I would lay on the couch and I would visualize my immune system and I could feel it tingling. I could feel the healing happening in my leg. And I didn't come from a medical family. I have no idea at all where this idea came from. But somehow it was noetic. It came directly to me that that was what I needed to do. And ultimately they took the cast off and I'm a two-legged creature still, thank goodness. And so I think that there was something about, my own personal experience with that healing, that there was something about recognizing that my mind was important to my body and my body was important to my mind, that I just knew intuitively.
I had an irregularity on a kidney that was discovered by an MRI. The physicians wanted to biopsy that, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I had a healer, Adam, a young man in Vancouver, who was developing his talents as a healer. He wanted to work on it. Over a period of a month, we did that once a week.
Using just a photograph, Adam can perceive a person's body field in the form of a holographic image. He sees areas where the energy flow is blocked, which indicates illness or injury. Through his intention to heal, he manipulates energy and information to clear these blockages, allowing the body to change.
I went back and had a sonogram made of that a month after diagnosis. The radiologist examined the data and said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, but the irregularity in the kidney is smaller and disappearing. Went back 3 months after that, and later in 2003, after that, where the total healing period had been less than 6 months, and again had sonogram, and it was totally gone. Everything was regular again. Nearly all of the healings that I have worked with have been remote or at a distance, and it doesn't seem to make the distance seems to have no effect at all, which would again suggest we're dealing with a quantum phenomena. The healer was in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was in Florida, the longest distance across the United States. So I've continued then to experiment with different healing modes for different things with different people. But the mechanism is always the same. There's information being transferred. And there seems to be an energy transfer as well that's palpable.
There are easily a couple dozen major studies in humans looking at the ability of prayer, or what researchers usually call healing intentions, to make a difference in somebody else's clinical course, even though they are unaware that this is being done. The landmark study was done at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine, published in 1988, looking at the effects of prayer to make a difference in patients in the coronary care unit. Those patients who were prayed for, unknown to them, had a better clinical course in many different areas than people in the so-called control group who were not intentionally prayed for. Those studies have been refined, improved over the years. We see studies now in not just heart disease, but in severe conditions such as advanced AIDS. We see studies
interestingly, not just in people, but in, for example, animals, and the physiology of plants and enzyme systems, even biochemical reactions in test tubes seem to respond to people's thoughts and intentions.
Dr. Larry Dosey, distinguished physician and international lecturer, is the author of several critically acclaimed titles including Reinventing Medicine, Healing Words, The Power of Prayer and the Practice of Medicine, Be Careful What You Pray For, You Just Might Get It, Recovering the Soul, A Scientific and Spiritual Search, and in recent years, The Extraordinary Healing Power of Ordinary Things. Dr. Larry Dosey has appeared on widely popular American television shows such as Oprah and on leading U.S. television channels such as CNN and the Learning Channel.
The new part of this is the evidence, the scientific studies which illustrate that when you look at this, that's actually what happens when you do what we call double-blind control test. You can show that something is happening at a distance. You can look at growth rates, or you can look at the rate of germination of seeds, even, which is a common methodology. And if you perform statistical analyses of these studies, you show, I think, very compellingly that something real is happening.
The question that's frequently asked is when a person has manifested a disease in their body temple or some kind of discomfort in their life, through the power of right thinking, can it be turned around? And the answer is absolutely yes.
On November 23rd, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I truly believed in my heart, with my strong faith, that I was already healed. During the day, all day long, I would just say, thank you for my healing. On and on and on I went, thank you for my healing. I believed in my heart I was healed. I saw myself as if cancer was never in my body. One of the things I did to heal myself was to watch very funny movies. That's all we would do, is just laugh, laugh, laugh. We couldn't afford to put any stress in my life because we knew stress was one of the worst things you can do while you're trying to heal yourself. From the time I was diagnosed, which was November 23rd, to the time I was healed totally was approximately 3 months. And that's without radiation and chemotherapy.
Well, we come with a basic program. It's called self-healing. You get a wound, it grows back together. You get a bacterial infection, the immune system comes and takes care of those bacteria and heals it up. The immune system is made to heal itself.
Disease cannot live in a body that's in a healthy emotional state. Your body is casting off millions of cells every second, and it's creating millions of new cells.
In fact, literally, parts of our body are replaced every day. Other parts take a few months, other parts a couple of years. But within a few years, we have a brand new physical body.
If you have a disease and you're focusing on it and you're talking to people about it, you're going to create more disease cells. See yourself living in a perfectly healthy body. Let the doctor look after the disease.
Can you feel the difference between having painful arthritis in your hips and feeling fearful about it? Or having painful arthritis in your hips and feeling hopeful about it? The difference between fearful and hopeful is the difference between recovery or not.
Happier thoughts lead to essentially a happier biochemistry, a happier, healthier body. Negative thoughts, stress, have been shown to seriously degrade the body and the functioning of the brain, because it's our thoughts and emotions that are continuously reassembling, reorganizing, recreating our body.
Remove physiological stress from the body, and the body does what it was designed to do. It heals itself.
I've seen kidneys regenerated. I've seen cancer dissolved. I've seen eyesight improve and come back.
I always say that incurable means curable from within.
You can change your life and you can heal yourself.
Well, my story begins on March 10, 1981. It really changed my whole life. It was a day I'll never forget. I crashed an airplane. I ended up in the hospital completely paralyzed. My spinal cord was crushed. I broke the first and second cervical vertebrae. My swallowing reflex was destroyed. I couldn't eat or drink. My diaphragm was destroyed. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was blink my eyes. The doctor, of course, said all my life I'd be a vegetable. All I'd do is blink my eyes the rest of my life. That's the picture they saw of me, but it didn't matter what they thought. The main thing was what I thought. I pictured myself being a normal person again, working out in that hospital. The only thing I had to work with in the hospital was my mind. As long as you have your mind, you can put things back together again. I was hooked to a respirator, and they said I'd never breathe on my own again because my diaphragm was destroyed. But this little voice kept saying to me, breathe deep, breathe deep. I was weaned from it. They were at a loss for an explanation. See, I could not afford to allow anything to come in my mind that would distract me from my goal and from my vision. Well, I set a goal to walk out of the hospital on Christmas. That was my goal. Months later, I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 feet. They said it couldn't be done. That's a day I will never forget. For people that are sitting out there right now watching this program that are hurting, if I wanted to sum up my life and sum up for people what they can do in life, I would sum it up this way in 6 words. Man becomes what he thinks about.
I was diagnosed with cancer, and it was vaginal cancer. And when you look back at my childhood with the rapes and all the other childhood abuse, and you realize that one of the mental causes for cancer is resentment, deep resentment that is held very strong till it literally eats away in the body. So where would I put my cancer? So I remember being very terrified, like anybody would, and I called my teacher and I said, Eric, they say I have cancer. And the first thing he said to me is, who is they? And I said, the doctors. And he said, Louise, you could not have done all this work on yourself to die of cancer. Now let's take a positive approach. And I clung to that. It was a lifeline for me. And I did things I hadn't done before. I went from being a junk food person to doing nutritional work and detoxifying my body, and I was detoxifying my mind, and I did a lot of things. I had tools to work with. And I said to myself, you're being given an opportunity to practice what you're teaching. You're telling people that they can heal anything if they're willing to do the work, and now it's your turn. I remember working with a therapist and banging pillows and getting anger out and all that stuff. But I think that the work I did at the time that was the most important for me was to do forgiveness. And I began to investigate the childhoods of my parents. And when I discovered their stories, I could understand where they were coming from. There was just horrendous things on both sides, all sides. So how could they know how to treat a little child when they weren't treated that well themselves? So as I began to do the forgiveness work and the therapy and the nutrition and everything, within 6 months, I was able to get the medical establishment to agree with what I already knew inside, that I no longer had cancer. And when that happened, I knew that anything could be healed. I knew, because I had done it myself. And all the other stuff helped, but I knew that all the affirmations and all the stuff I was doing. So that gave me an extraordinarily strong belief. And when you have a strong belief, you can do anything.
I was diagnosed with a condition inside of my body where a doctor told me that something was growing, a cancerous tumor that shouldn't be there. And I trusted the medical system, because that's our culture, that's the way we're raised. And there's a part of us that says, even if I go the holistic route, I'm going to let a medical person tell me what's going on, just for that validation. So it was my opportunity to put into practice everything that I ever learned. And rather than concentrating on something that should not be in my body, I began feeling that my body was vital and healthy, rather than focusing on making something change. However, through the influence of family and friends, I underwent a medical procedure anyway. I went into the operating room, I was anesthetized, and the next thing I remember, I woke up. And there was a doctor looking at me, and he said, "What are you doing here? There's nothing there." All I'd done were the practices and the principles that I'd traveled halfway around the world to learn, and I employed it in my own life, and it worked in that moment. I have the photographs showing there's nothing in my body. I was anesthetized, and they did an exploratory for no reason at all. Because of that, I can speak with conviction. I can look anyone, a scientist, a doubting audience member, and I can look them in the eye with conviction and say, this is what I know to be true in my life, that there's a power inside of your body. The ancients say it's the most powerful force in the universe. The philosopher Neville, early in the 20th century, said that there's a power inside of every human against which no earthly force is of the slightest consequence.
I did a whole bunch of research on cancer. I wanted to know who had beaten cancer and what was the common denominator. So I did a lot of reading, and I discovered that the common denominator was everyone, no matter what treatment that they chose, they were well because they changed the way they thought.
I knew that opening myself up physically to the surgeon's knife was an adjunct to true healing, and that I needed really to open spiritually.
Your body's not your enemy, which of course I think anyone who's first experienced disease or pain, I think we're taught that, why is my body doing this to me, instead of why am I going through this experience? And it sort of let me shift my thinking to, I need to love my body through this.
I'm thankful that I actually got cancer, because I needed a big wake-up call. I was the type of person that needed almost to get hit between the eyes.
I'm in remission, and I feel wonderful, and I've never felt better about myself. I still walk around daily, and I use that affirmation that she had for cancer. It's the, I lovingly forgive and release everything in my past. I choose to fill my world with joy. I love and accept myself.
It was life-changing. It was one of these things where not only was I grateful for my illness, but in the end, much healthier than I had been before.
Genes are not controlling our biology. When we get issues running in families, for example, cancer, we immediately look at a genealogy chart and mark all the recipients of this cancer running through the family, and then turn around and say, look, genetics, this is running in the family, so there must be cancer genes. What they've left out of this very interesting piece of research that reveals that when children are adopted into families that have cancer, the adopted children will express the cancer with the same propensity as any natural child in that family. But the interesting fact is the child comes from totally different genetics that doesn't even have that cancer. So it says being introduced into the family dynamics, which is where you learn perceptions and beliefs and attitudes, is what shapes the cancer, not the genetics that somebody came in with.
There's this interesting thing that happens when somebody gets it, really downloads a more positive way of thinking. They get hormonal balancing, for one thing. We know that when somebody is thinking with their heart, like they see a puppy or a sleeping baby, and they go, your DHEA levels rise,
which begins to balance your hormones, but something else really more important happens, and that is the beat-to-beat variability of the heart normalizes. And you get into this wave pattern that you can see on a heart rate monitor that actually begins to balance the entire body, given that the heart is a huge electromagnet that in fact trains the rest of the body.
It's not a thinking process. Thoughts are important. The ancients made a distinction between thoughts and feelings and emotions. And it's the feelings that are centered in our heart, that there is an effect from that it changes the electrical and the magnetic fields in our heart, and that those fields literally change the stuff that our world is made of around our bodies. And what the science now is showing is that when you can change the field that the atom is in, you change the atom. And we're made of those atoms. So when we have feelings in our hearts, we're changing the field that connects the stuff everything is made of, and we literally are altering our physical reality in ways that sound miraculous.
Today we will be interviewing Dr. Joe Dispenza, an American expert on the role and function of the human brain.
We are here with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he is going to be talking to us about the evolution of the brain and what our potential is. So welcome to the show today.
Happy to be with you.
I'd like to start with, how did you first get interested in this field?
Well, I've always been interested in human potential. I'm interested in what makes human beings tick, but I got run over by a truck in a triathlon back in 1986 and broke 6 bones in my back, and the diagnosis was that I would probably never walk again. I had multiple compression fractures of my thoracic spine, and I had bone fragments on my spinal cord. So the recommendation at the time was radical surgery from 4 different surgeons in Southern California. Anyway, I decided not to have the surgery, and my belief at the time, and still is, that the power that made the body heals the body. I decided that if I could take some time and begin to connect or develop a relationship with that power, that intelligence, if I could begin to give it some instructions, give it some orders, to give it a template, and then create an idea or a picture of what I wanted, and then surrender this condition to this mind and ask it to begin to do the healing for me, that maybe it might work. And so I decided to not let any thought go by unchecked, a thought that would be connected to the possibility of never walking again, or any of the fears or anxieties that people typically have.
Dr. Dispenza was determined to cure himself.
So every day, 2 hours a day, twice a day, I would reconstruct my spine from start to finish. And if my mind wandered to an extraneous thought, or I began to worry or get afraid, I would stop and start all over again from the very beginning. And what I didn't know at the time was that I was developing a good amount of focus and a good amount of concentration. I wanted it to be the exact thing I wanted. And because I didn't have the surgery, they told me that it would take 6 months to a year to walk again, and I'd have to wear this big body cast. And I was back on my feet in 9.5 weeks, and back training at around 11 weeks, and back in my office in 12 weeks. So,
at what point did you realize that you were seeing results, and that must have given you more interest in continuing on with that program?
I was in extreme pain. A terrible pain, and I had some neurological changes in my body, and so when my body started to respond in ways, and pain levels were going back, and feeling was coming back, and movement was coming back, I was pretty excited. That was the feedback I needed, because the brain learns by feedback. In other words, when we see some observable change, we can correlate what we did inside to produce that effect.
The doctors must have been shocked.
Yeah, they were. They were actually shocked.
One of the key areas of Dr. Dispenza's research is in the area of spontaneous remission. This is the study of sudden reversals of an illness without a medical explanation. In the following conversation, Dr. Dispenza discusses 2 of the 4 main commonalities he has observed from studying people who have experienced spontaneous remissions from serious medical conditions.
Now, you've done a lot of study on spontaneous remission.
When I was spending those long nights, laying down and couldn't sleep, I just made myself a deal. I just said if I'm ever able to walk again, that I would spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection. And so it started my investigation into spirituality and my investigation into health and attitude. I traveled to 17 different countries over the last 11 years now and studied people that were diagnosed with serious health conditions, and then they changed their mind and they got better. And so it was so exciting to me, I went back to school and got a degree in neuroscience because I wanted to understand what it was that they were doing that was producing those effects. And so it kind of catapulted me to the next level.
What is it that they were doing that produces those effects?
There were 4 common things that I noticed that got my attention. And the first thing was that they all believed and accepted that there was some spiritual aspect that lived within them, that there is something that gives us life. And there's nothing mystical about spirituality. It's a consciousness, it's an intelligence that keeps your heart beating 2 gallons of blood per minute, 100 gallons of blood in an hour, 100,000 times in one day through 60,000 miles of blood vessels. That we lose 10 million cells every second and we make another 10 million cells. Something's giving us life. There's a mind that's so much greater than our mind, that has a will so much greater than our will, and has a love for life that's so much greater than our love for life, our personality self. And when our will matches its will, when our mind matches its mind, and when our love for life matches its love for us or for life, that's when it begins to respond. So they began to develop a relationship with this invisible force. Just like you develop a relationship with your husband or your wife or your mother or father or your kids or your dog or your pets, they took time out of their day to begin to put their attention on, begin to interact with it. And they wanted to surrender again that condition to this giver of life, and they gave it some pretty strong instructions, and they asked for help. And this consciousness loves us so much that it allows us our free will. So if we insist on suffering, it gives light to reinforce our suffering. And then if we insist on joy, it organizes our bodies and our life in ways that match who we are being. So that's the first thing they had in common. The second thing they had in common is that they all understood that it was their own mismanagement of their thoughts and reactions that created their disease. We live in 2 states of mind. We live in survival or creation. And when we live in those states of anger or aggression or hatred or judgment or fear or anxiety or insecurity or pain or suffering or depression, it's those chemicals that are created from the chemicals of stress or survival that activate those states of mind. And the redundancy of those chemicals are the chemicals that push the genetic buttons that begin to cause disease. You see, every time we have a thought, we make a chemical. So if we have a great thought or if we have an unlimited thought, we make chemicals that make us feel great or feel unlimited. And if we have negative thoughts or self-depreciating thoughts, we make chemicals that make us feel negative or unworthy. So this immaterial thing called thought fires a set of circuits in the brain that produces a chemical to signal the body for us to feel exactly the way we were just thinking. The moment we feel the way we think, we begin to think the way we feel, which produces more chemicals for us to think the way we feel.
This creates a big loop.
And this loop, this cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, creates what I call a state of being. And it's the cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time that begins to condition the body to memorize that emotional state better than the conscious mind. The third thing they had in common is that they said that they had to reinvent themselves. They had to become somebody else. They couldn't be the same person any longer. They began to change their brain just by thinking differently. And we can do that. And the neuroscience behind it says that we can change our brain whenever we learn new things, but more importantly, we can begin to rehearse mentally rehearse who we want to be. And as we do that, we force the brain to fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever we make the brain work differently, we just made a new mind. The last thing they had in common, which I found so unique, was that they had long moments where they lost track of time and space, where they were sitting down and they were creating this new ideal that when they opened their eyes, they expected it to be an hour later. I mean, they opened their eyes, they thought it was 20 minutes, and it was an hour and a half later. In other words, they became so involved in their rehearsal that time and space disappeared. And they moved from that state of survival to the state of creation. In the state of creation, we become selfless. We forget about ourselves. And on functional imagery, if you look at nuns in a reverie of prayer or Buddhist monks in meditation, the part of the brain that turns on is called the frontal lobe, and that is like the volume control of the brain. And when the frontal lobe begins to work properly, it quiets down all the other circuits in the brain so nothing else is being processed but a single-minded thought. And all of a sudden they started to experience altruistic states of compassion and joy and inspiration and goodwill. What they didn't know is that the moment they were doing that, they were reconditioning the body to a new mind. They were beginning to change the gene and activate new genetic expressions as a result of it.
And heal.
And heal.
As the result.
As a result, yes. When we produce coherent patterns in the brain, synchronized coherent patterns, the immune system gets very strong. These monks didn't get sick because their system was so integrated and so orderly that disease couldn't live in their body. The signal that's traveling down the central nervous system is creating amazing order that allows the body to begin to function in wonderful ways.
People don't know what they are. People really don't know what kind of a being they are. And because of that, which is in many cases kept purposely away from them, they're manipulated.
How can you get a grasp of your own life and take any kind of control of your own experience if you don't know who you are, where you are, or the nature of the world you're living in? And this information for me is by far the most important.
The chief responsibility you have to do is to know what you are and be a human being, not a human doing. If we truly knew what we were, we would never do what we're doing.
Although our package of skin and bones looks very convincing, it is a mask.
an illusion disguising our true self, which has no limitations.
You see, the Big Bang occurred merely as a result of the Creator's will and intention to experience himself. And so it expanded outwards and manifested itself as consciousness into everything that exists. So not only are we a part of God, but we possess all the unlimited power to create as God does. And our free will was his greatest gift of all.
When you start to realize what your true nature is, there is no question, there is no answer anymore. And there's just sudden realization. Now you come back from the rabbit hole and you start to perform in this world of illusion and wonder and magic with that understanding that you're never going to die and you were never born.
And so if you think you're this meat suit running around, think again. You're a spiritual being. You're an energy field operating in a larger energy field.
We're all connected. We just don't see it. There isn't an out there and an in here. Everything in the universe is connected. It's just one energy field.
You are extensions of source energy, and you are here in these magnificent bodies, but your bodies have distracted you, for the most part, from who you really are. You are source energy. You are eternal beings. You are God force. You are that which you call God.
Scripturally, we could say that we are the image and the likeness of God. We could say we are another way that the universe is becoming conscious of itself. We could say that we are the infinite field of unfolding possibility. All of that would be true.
Every great tradition has told you that you were created in the image and the likeness of the creative source. That means that you have God potential and power to create your world, and you are. You are.
Are there any limits to this? Absolutely not. We are unlimited beings. We have no ceiling. The capabilities and the talents and the gifts and the power that is within every single individual on this planet is unlimited.
There is nothing that you cannot be or do or have. You are a magnificent creator, and you are here by your powerful and deliberate wanting to be here.
I believe that you're great, that there's something magnificent about you. Regardless of what has happened to you in your life, regardless of how young or how old you think you might be, the moment you begin to think properly, there's something that is within you, there's power within you that's greater than the world, it will begin to emerge. It will take over your life. It will feed you. It will clothe you. It will guide you, protect you, direct you, sustain your very existence if you let it. That is what I know for sure. right now to feel healthy. You can begin to feel prosperous. You can begin to feel the love that's surrounding you, even if it's not there. And what will happen is the universe will correspond to the nature of your song. The universe will correspond to the nature of that inner feeling and manifest, because that's the way you feel.